Welcome to the She Did It Her Way podcast, where it's all about making the ultimate leap from your 9 to 5 and building a business and life you love, all while doing it your way. I'm your host, Amanda Boleyn. Let's get started. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode. My goodness, by the time this one airs, we will officially be in spring in the Northern Hemisphere, which I could not be more excited for. I am pumped for the spring weather, the birds chirping, all of that good stuff. And today I have a very, I want to say special episode, but I feel like every episode is special, whether it's myself or if there are guests, and I'm always excited to press record. Today's episode is going to be short, but it's going to be sweet and it's going to be strong and it's going to be impactful. And I think it's a message that a lot of you may need to hear, and a message in order to feel like you have that permission to not have it all figured out when you make your first step towards building your business. What I see often is this undercurrent of control, which is natural, right? Anytime we do something that is completely outside of the norm, our 2+ million year old brain wants to jump in and protect us. And so what it does is that when it senses fear, it will try to control everything. It will try to predict everything. It will want to know steps 1 through 10, even though rightfully so in the beginning, you realistically can only see steps 1 and 2. And when you can't see steps 1 through 10 or 2 through 10, your brain kind of freaks out. And what typically happens is that it then causes a problem at step 11 when you haven't even taken that first step. So then, because you've created a problem in your brain, you don't even take that first step. And so that is one of the common themes and things that I see happen most often with new business owners trying to get started, trying to get their business off the ground, is that it begins with this sense of this undercurrent of control, wanting to know what your business will look like in a year, wanting to know all the problems so that you can control it, wanting to have something be so perfect in a certain way, and the thought that if it's not going to be exactly the way that you want it, then what's the point of even getting started in the first place? And so it's the fear of not getting it right, the fear of getting it wrong, the fear of what if it doesn't succeed, the fear of, well, this problem's going to arrive at step X, Y, and Z, and it's really overwhelming and I don't know how to solve it, so why even start in the first place, right? So the fear that it's not going to be exactly the way that you want it, I see keeps a lot of people stuck. And this is something that I want you to know, is that anytime you do something that you've never done before, you are so vulnerable in the beginning of getting started because you're doing something that you've never done before. Your brain doesn't have that past experience to say, you've done this before. This is how it happens. This is what unfolds. Instead, it freaks out. It's just like learning to ride a bike or learning to drive a stick shift. Any said quote unquote failure you experience is magnified in the beginning because it is so new. But it's learning to fail, learning to put yourself out there, learning to push past and move through the fear is exactly the same thing as riding a bicycle, is learning to drive a stick shift when you start building your own business. Thinking that there is a right way and a wrong way to do something can also keep you stuck, because what happens is that if you do something and you put yourself out there and it ends in a quote unquote, and I like to say quote unquote failure because I believe failure is simply just data and outcome, our brain may think, well, that was wrong. There must be a right way to do it. And the challenge with the right way and the wrong way of thinking is that it can oftentimes paralyze you from taking any action in the beginning. Because if you're a high performer, you don't want to be wrong. You're not used to being wrong. You are used to like doing your due diligence. You are used to doing your research. And so for you, being wrong or getting it wrong is not something that probably happens that often. But in this world of building your business, I want you to practice and try on the thought that like, what if there is no right or wrong? What if there's only experiences and learnings and outcome? Because the thought again of thinking that there's a right way or there's a wrong way is going to keep you stuck and is going to keep you from taking action. I can tell you, after being in the online business space for years, there are so many different ways that you can get to your first 100K. It is like abundant that there are so many different ways. You will find so many different coaches that will teach you so many different strategies and so many different ways on how to get to 100K that there is no right or wrong way to get to 100K. There's just a way, right? There's just a way to get your business started. But the one thing that's in common between all of these multiple ways is that they just started and they figured it out along the way. It was a messy, massive action. The cost of not taking action and trying to think your way through, worried about right and wrong in the first early stages is costly because it will stall you up. And so anytime you're focused on doing it right, you won't do it at all. And that perfection will kill that momentum. It will shut you down. And it's willing to experiment, willing to come from a place of being curious and willing to come from a place of not being right, but being wrong on how you do something and not making it mean that if you're wrong, that it says anything about you. What it is you are looking and getting data and assessing what worked and what didn't. Because if you're focused on doing it right, you're going to overanalyze in your head, thinking there's a right way when there are so many ways to do one thing. And there's multiple ways to do that one thing. The ultimate thing is just pick one way of doing it and do it that way and execute. And if you have so many questions about the process and you're trying to control it and you're trying to understand, there's a place and there's a difference of asking questions because you're curious, and there's questions because you want to understand, but there's also asking questions from a place of trying to control because you don't want to get it wrong. And what I want to offer you, I'm sure there are best practices. Let me say that. There are definitely best practices on how to do things, but only you know to that extent that if you are finding yourself that you're asking questions, that you are coming from this place of wanting to control because you don't want to be wrong, I want to offer you up a few different thoughts that you can think. One is thinking that there is no right or wrong way of doing something. Two, a thought that failure simply just means data. That's it. And the sooner that I get started, and the sooner I take action, the sooner I can understand what works and what doesn't. Also thinking I am open to what's possible. Sometimes if we get so laser focused on how something needs to be, we create that narrowness, and it's kind of like if you focus on something so intensely, you kind of ignore everything else that's happening around you. And sometimes that can be the magic piece of it. And the last one is I trust that what unfolds is meant to be. So it's really practicing this letting go of control and letting go of this need for it to be right or wrong. And again, let me end with this. There's certainly best practices on ways to do things and how to get started. But what I will say is not allowing yourself to get caught in the thought loop that there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do it. And if you identify and see that you are stalling yourself out from actually taking any sort of action, there's probably that fear of needing it to be right that is holding you back. And if that is the case, remind yourself that there is no right or wrong way of doing something. There's only a way of doing something. And there's only what works and what doesn't, and come from a place of curiosity. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, this week's episode. Come hang out with me on Instagram. And until next time, keep doing it your way.
If you enjoyed today's podcast episode, you can head on over to shediditherway.com, where you can access the entire vault of She Did It Her Way podcast episodes. And you can also access free trainings and resources all about how to make the ultimate leap from your 9 to 5. And if you enjoyed today's podcast episode, I would be so grateful if you headed on over to iTunes and left a review letting me know what you love about the She Did It Her Way podcast. Until next time, keep doing it your way.